you have time to read this article.
Oh, nice.
That's okay, that's fine. We'll probably be discussing things around that. And I should say that to start with, this article was motivated by a WhatsApp post, right? A friend of mine from Zimbabwe posted something on his status, and then I saw it was asking the question, is evangelism now politically prophetic or prophetically political? So just posted it random on his status. And then I think that I got interested in it. And I sent him a message and I was like, we should write a paper on this. There's a lot to talk about. So that was what led to this particular article, and then we had to come up with a group of scholars and then we came up with this. But before we go into this, we are going to be contextualizing the entirety of politics in itself. Again, I will ask, how many of us have taken a course in politics here? Anybody? Nobody? Okay, so you guys are all media experts. Okay, so you know something more than I do, probably. Okay, so I will discuss the political side. And then again, I was told some of you were in my class last year. Is that true? Okay, how many of you were in my class last year? Okay, so you've seen this face before. Okay, that's good. Okay, so it's nice to see you physically, and then for you to also see me physically. There's this movie that I don't know if you've seen it before, I can't remember the name, of a very, is it politically correct to say fact? It's politically correct, right? Of this facts guy that teaches an online class. So his video is always off because he doesn't want the student to see the size of his body. You see it?
Yeah.
Yeah. So what I'm trying to do there is that at least I'm not the whale, right? I'm not that big. Okay, so let's go to this. Okay, let's see if this works. Please work. Okay. Yeah. So because of contemplating politics in itself. So when we talk about politics, I was going to ask you before this, but you see already. When we talk about politics, any idea what that means? Apart from what you are seeing on the slide. Any idea when somebody asks you, let's say your younger self asks you politics, and what would be your conceptualization of that? Yeah.
Most people power dynamics, and the second part is in spaces like the workspace church, but then often politics are really programming power dynamics, potentially authority, like, yeah, the law, the base of
I like that. Power dynamics, law, that they expect citizens to put a lot of terms there. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah.
Also a lot of different opinions and sides to things. Based on those opinions, you are grouped in with a specific just a group of people that believe a certain thing.
Yeah, a group of people believe in a certain thing. So we say they are grouped in quote and unquote WhatsApp groups. Yeah. Nice. Any other contribution? When you say politics, what comes to mind? Right? People with ideas, right? Philosophical ideas. People group as relating to one idea or one ideology. Yeah? Any other question? Okay, so yeah, that's a way to start with. What you said basically is what politics is, right? And there's always the general notion politics has to do with government, it has to do with power dynamics and the likes. But beyond that, right? Politics is everything we do. You get that, right? Aristotle referred to man, right? Aristotle, you hear about Aristotle everywhere in medicine, in biology, sociology. Is practically the father of knowledge, quote and unquote, right? Or better, it has something to say about every aspect of knowledge. And he said man is a political animal, right? So we are all political animals, right? That's the concept of Aristotle. And the argument is to say that man is he also refers to man as social animal too, right? But a man is a political animal. The context of that is that we, at every instance, want to relate. There's always a power dynamic that's happening. There's always a concept about resource sharing, right? There is the need to share resources. And these resources in most cases do not necessarily imply the macro sharing, even the big ones, right? It may be the little things that we do within our spaces, right? And then in that discourse of politics, we talk about, for instance, what we decide to hear today, right, is political. Altogether, what it implies is that you choose between different, you probably have a list of clothes and then you decide, okay, should I wear this? Should I not wear this? You get that? So in itself, all these things are politics, right? Looking at politics from a macro perspective, from intra and inter relationship that happens within man. So the concept of politics in itself starts from the Greek, the ancient city of Athens, right? And it's the Greek word that is spelled as what? Polis, which means states. Polis, which means city-states, right? We say politics is the process of making decisions, right? For a group in the face of diversity and complexity. There are different definitions to the concept of politics, but the central concept of politics is discussed by David Easton and Harold Laswell, right? So David Easton referred to politics as what? The authoritative allocation of values, right? It implies that there is something, a particular value to share, a particular resources to be distributed. So politics is the allocation that happens when it comes to what? That particular resources, right? So it may be at this point a material resources. It also may be an abstract resources that is available within the community to be shared. So for him, we believe that politics is what? That's authoritative allocation. But how do you allocate this value, right? So it implies that the definition of politics at this point is still missing some things. Are we together? Right? So that brings us to the concept of Harold Laswell. We define politics as what? Who gets what, when, and how. You see the correlation with Easton's definition of what? Allocation of values, right? But for you to allocate values, you need to determine the value that is being allocated. Right? You need to determine who gets allocation. For instance, if I'm to put the practical terms now, let's say I give this class $50, right? $50, and I said this $50 is for the class. How do we go about dividing it? Anybody? What do we do with it? Or is $50 too small for the class? That's life itself. Everything is small. It's not sufficient for us. How do we divide $50 in this class? What will be the indices that we put in place? It's not a trick question. Yes.
But first we decided what do we need to know how to spend it.
Okay, what do you need? Okay, what else are the things you need to put in place when you look at the $50 for this class? What do you do? Yes. Okay, do you want to spend it evenly? Or people get more? What else do you look at? So how do we, is it possible for us to achieve equality within the society? Can we, is it possible for us to spread it evenly? Is it a possibility? It's not a trick question, people. Is it possible? It's possible, right? In an idealistic society, in an idealistic world, right? It is possible for us to divide that particular fund equally. Are you getting me? We'll get to that when we look at realism and liberalism. But within politics now, right? If you look at it from the concept of Harold Laswell, we ask that question. Now we know the what, which is $50, right? So we ask ourselves, who gets from this particular value, right? Which is $50. Who should share from this, right? How should, that's where the innovative comes to play, right? How should we share this particular fund? So when we talk about the who, we say people in class today, right? So which implies that the people that are not in class today, we can say you guys are excluded, right? So there's already an exclusion. Then we determine how should that be divided among us? Should we go equally? If we do equally, what will be the percentage that goes to everyone, right? And so that's the question we ask. And then, when should we do that in the first place? Should we do that now in class? Should we do it after class? How should we go about it, right? And then, so basically that's the concept in politics in itself. So you can transpose the same analogy within the general society in itself to say, okay, the distribution of resources that the society have, let's say the allocation even within Ontario, for instance, every year there's always a budget conversation, right? You've had the word budget cuts at several instances, right? When there is budget cuts, for instance, which department should be affected? Who should we lay off? Who should we keep? Within the university in itself, what do we do, right? So basically, the conversations around this, and that's why I was talking about your clothes just now, what you wear and all that, right? The conversation around who gets the spotlight, who do not get the spotlight, what determines who get the spotlight. That's where the concept of power comes to play, the definition we had just now. Who has power, right? How should we determine the allocation of power itself? Power is what? The ability to influence behavior. It's that power that determines the how of resource allocation, right? It's that power that also determines what is referred to as what authoritative allocation, right? Who owns that power and determines that? So basically that's the concept of politics in itself. So the entirety of politics hovers around this concept. There are other definitions of politics as it stands, but the entirety of this definition of politics still resolve within the concept of power allocations, resources allocation, how these resources are distributed, and who benefits from these resources once they are distributed. For instance, Weber referred to it as what? The sharing of power and influence, right? Aristotle again talked about master science concerning what? Doing good. And then you see Robert Davier talk about the persistent power of what? Human relationship, right? It goes back to the concept of Aristotle when he said politics is what? Man is what? Is a political animal. So basically that's the whole concept that's relating to the discourse politics. Now, in the conceptualization of politics, it's very important that we also get the realist and liberalist perspective to politics, right? And this is an entire course in itself, but we'll try to just summarize it as much as possible. When we talk about realism, right? We said it was the ability or the concepts whereby you refer to things as they are, right? This is what? What is this? A table, right? It is not a chair, right? So from a liberalist point of view, this is a table, right? It is not a chair, right? But we can also say from a realist point of view, this is a table. You see things as they are, right? While a liberalist, which is the other aspect of the conversation, see things as what? As they should be, right? Not necessarily as they are, but as they what? As they should be. And we will argue in that case to say that this may be a table, but I can sit on it, right? So for that reason, it is what? I can refer to it as a chair. Does that make sense? Right? So that's the liberalist view. Well, let's talk about the state of realism. So realism in itself, in the concept of politics, see things as they are, talks about politics as being pessimistic, right? You see the arguments under realism talks about the major theorists of realism is Hans Mangantua, right? And his argument is to say that man is inherently evil, right? Evil is a nature of man, right? And because of the evil nature of man, we are selfish beings, right? Every action we carry out our action and inaction is influenced by self. So even when you think that what we do is in itself altruistic, our altruistic nature is still from the concept of selfishness, right? I always want to say this in most of my class. Is to argue on this, and that's why I said I was talking about she introducing me the first time, right? We understand the concept of love, right? Huh? Love. How many of us are in love here? Okay, we have few people that are in love. But how many of so how many of you believe that love is real? Is love real? Okay, a big chunk of the class believe that love is real, right? As you see, I also think love is real, right? At least I'm married, right? Okay, but now let's stick to the concept of realism. So within realism, the argument is that love is a lie. Love does not exist. Love, within the concept of our definition of love, is selfishness. You get that? So when I say I love you, what I'm expressing is I like what I feel with you. You get that? So it is not about you. It's about me. Does that make sense? Right? So when two people say they are in love, what happens? It is just two selfish people that their selfish interest aligns. Does that make sense? So when this interest do no longer align, what happens? Then you say you are no longer in a relationship. What happened to the love that you used to have? Interest change. Does that make sense? Huh? Is it confusing? Right? So that's the concept. That's what the realists will say, right? Because they see everything is from a pessimistic notion of man. You get that? So everything is you suspect every action. So when somebody smiles at you, they are not smiling because they like you. You get the idea? Or they are not relating with you because you are the best person in the world. They are relating with you from that space of what? Of selfishness. You get that? So realism will also go ahead to tell you that, for instance, an argument you may probably say is that, so what happens to the love of the mother to the child, or parents to children and the likes? In itself is also selfishness. You get that? They do that because of the feeling they get, right? You, quote and unquote, are collateral beneficiary of someone else's selfishness. Does that make sense? Right? That's the realist. That's not me. Are we together? Right? That's the concept of realism. That selfishness is just the order of the day. So when you look at, are you guys familiar with the onion principle? You know onion, right? Huh? You know it's always in layers, right? So in most cases, what you see is the outward layer. That's why you see the suppose this person likes me, right? He's doing this thing for my benefit. You get that? So that's the first layer. But when you dig down, right? When you peel the onion down, you realize that there was a self in that autistic action. So even when somebody, quote and unquote, dies for you, right? That death is also a selfish act. You get the idea? That is the argument the pessimist will talk about. You get that? And because at every instance they see what? Our action as motivated by what? By selfishness. Thank you very much. You are following. Our actions are what? Are motivated by selfishness. So for that reason, when it comes to the concept of politics, the argument is that, yes.
Where is the place of selflessness then?
Okay, so that will be the next point we want to discuss when we talk about liberalism, right? But within the concept of realism, right, there is no selflessness that is standing on itself, on its own. There's no independent action that is not selfish. That makes sense, right? That is what realism,
So, in my first classes, I kind of all of you would say that it's impossible for all children.
Yes. That's the realist worldview, right? That every altruistic action, right, has a selfish, right? In fact, realism will argue to say that sometimes you don't even know that the action supposedly that you are carrying out that is altruistic was as a result of your own selfish interest. A case in point, an argument is the realist will make is that you are doing good because you want to make heaven, right? Right? So you see, the reason why you did good was because you want to make heaven. If you had a blank check and you make heaven regardless of what you do, will you still do good? Does that make sense? That's what the realist will argue, right? And then when you look at that within the concept of politics, the argument would then be that your actions justify the means. Every action, right? That your whatever you do, the ends justify the means. That's the word. The ends does what? It justify the means. So whatever you do is fine. Anything you do within the concept of politics is right. There's no wrong, right? And you remember that within the concept of right and wrong, again we go to the concept of ethics, right? Right and wrong is relative, right? It's related to time, to place, and time, place, and what? Right, related to time and place, right? Time in the sense that it can be what is good, what is supposedly good in now, some years ago was not seen as some years ago not necessarily seen as good now. So that's the relativity of time, right? And the relativity of place will be what? What is seen as good here in Canada is not necessarily what is seen as good in what? In Saudi Arabia, for instance. You get that? So morality is dependent on place and time. But within the space of politics, everything goes. So if I need this laptop, I can afford to kill, right? So at that point, killing is not wrong, right? Because at the end of the day, I get this laptop, right? So I can eliminate her. That's fine, right? Does that make sense, right? That's the space of the realist. And if you are familiar with the most whole concept of the state of nature, right? The argument in the state of nature is to say that before now, right, the entirety of the society was chaotic, right? There was at that point, in the state of nature, life was short, it was brutish, it was poor and nasty, right? At that point, might was right. Does that make sense? Might was what? Was right. So if I have more strength than you do, then I can take your stuff, right? And then eliminate you, right? And then somebody else that is stronger than me will also do the same thing. You get that? And then it continues on that trajectory, right? And then within that place, so to avoid that situation of that chaoticness, whereby I destroy using you now, so I destroy her because I'm stronger than her, and then she's stronger than me, she does what? She destroys me, and then the next person destroys her because they are stronger. You get the idea? So that's what happens within the state of nature. At that point, within the concept of politics, that is okay, right? That is okay. That is fine, right? And that is why we argue within the space of politics. I suppose you must have heard they say politics is a dirty game, right? Have you heard that word before? Politics as what? As a dirty game. The idea of dirtiness of politics is that people do whatever. As long as we get, remember what we said here, as long as we get the ability, the power that is required for us to what? To authoritatively allocate value. Anyhow we go about getting that power is okay, right? So that's why that's the argument in realism. So he said politics is all about self-interest. So everything we do is about interest. And because our interests will not align, your interest is not my interest, your viewpoint and your ideas about life is not my viewpoint and ideas about life. But we all need that power to be able to allocate resources. There will constantly be conflict, right? So conflict in society is inevitable. Conflict will always happen. There will always be war. So for some of us that will always pray for peace, rarely say that peace is not possible. You get that? There's constant conflict. So I'm going to discuss the concept of conflict. We have inter conflict, right? There's conflict that's happening within us, right? There's conflict that's happening outside us. There's conflict that's happening within the entirety of the society and itself. So conflict is natural. Now, because conflict is natural, there's have to be a way that we tend to balance to create stability within the system, right? To create stability within the system is what leads to the concept of what? Balance of power, right? So what do we mean by balance of power? Remember I said I have the power to do some things, right? So all that needs to happen is that because I have the power to take over her resources, and she's realizing I can take over her resources, she can join forces with her, right? By the time they join forces together, they can balance my own power. So that way, I will not be able to attack. Does that make sense? So there's what? The concept of balance of power at that place. But what happened within reality is that over time, they were the victim before now, right? Then they become the perpetrator of the act. Does that make sense? Then it becomes a situation whereby now I feel they are more powerful than me, then I will join forces with him. You get that? To balance off this power. Then one will be more powerful, and then they too will join forces. You get that? What do you see is happening? So before now we are what? Multiple powers. Everybody is separate, right? But over time we're joining forces. There's alliance. That's what we call alliance creation, right? So this alliance creation leads to different power blocks within the society. You get that? So historically, what we found within the society, within the system, the global system, for instance, is where we have first the multipolar system, right? Whereby there are individual powers, right? And then over time there was the alliance of these powers that now led to the bipolar system, for instance, where you have, say, the USSR and the USA as a superpower in the world, right? And then over time you have the USA as the most powerful country in the world. And then that also happened within our local sphere, right? Within our local sphere we have different ideas of that. So that is the realist perspective to life and to politics. But to counterbalance this, we have what? The liberalist perspective, right? In the liberalist or the idealistic perspective to politics and life, first, the argument of liberalism is to argue that there is good in man, regardless of. So that obviously to start with, liberalism argues that is to see things as they should be, and not necessarily as what? As they are, right? It is how they should be. So it is possible for things to be bad, but we can see where they are supposed to be naturally. Does that make sense? Right? So under liberalism, conflict is whatever. Let's start with man. Man may have some level of evil in him, right? But man has the ability to do good. You get that? Man has the ability to do good. So within that space, going back to our point on love, right? Love is real. Altruism, right, is possible. You get that? Because there's good in man. Does that make sense? Right? There's good in man. Man has the ability to see things that way. And because there's good in man, man can cooperate. In as much as we have conflicting interests, right? It is possible for us to work to cooperate. It's possible for us to do things together. Sometimes it's possible for us, within the liberalist point of view, to say, okay, we can actually suppress our interests of others. You get that? So for that reason, when things like self-sacrifice and the likes happen, you say it comes from the genuine heart. You get that? So that's what liberalism will argue. And like I said, because cooperation is possible, then we can limit the amount of conflict that happens in the society. Does that make sense? Right? So, based on this, let's talk. right? Based on this conceptualization of politics and the likes, do you think that religion has a place in politics? Anybody? Anybody? Any taker? Yeah.
More or less, if the two alternatives look at, both make a sort of moral statement about man. So I think religion in the sense of like worldview and morality would have to play a role something that concerns generalization of human nature.
Okay, okay. Yeah, any other contribution to that? Do you think that yes?
Like you said, because religion gives us like a moral framework about things, it can help with making certain decisions about how to like allow people to live together. Because we're Christians, I'll use the Bible. It tells us about how it can help us figure out like the balance of how we can handle human beings interaction.
I like that. Yes, any other contribution? Yes.
Also, religious or deeply almost impossible to decide what you want to do. Part of what your views are. So, you're sharing your views and you're sharing the principles to share. Religion is simple, or religion is inherently affecting all of those.
Okay. Any other person want to add to that? I like that. Anybody wants to add to that? Based on what we discussed so far, you can look at it from the realist view, the liberalist view. Religion has a space in politics. I get the moral framework that we've discussed, right? And the discourse of views. Any other person? Okay. Is it time to take a break? So let's look at it from this space, this conversation we just had now, right? Reasonable concepts on Christ and culture, and where we place it within the liberalist realist framing. So when you look at this, right, in the first conceptualization or as a stand, when you look at Christ against culture, you know, you say culture is what? What is culture? What is culture? Anybody?
It's the way of life.
Culture is the way of life of the people, right? Culture is the way of life, the uniqueness of life, the way of life of the people. And within this space of politics that the argument is, right, we are looking at the political configuration and the political culture of the society in which we find ourselves, right? This argument on Christ against culture is to say that within the space of the Bible, we said there's a conscious difference between culture, right, and the body of Christ, the entirety of Christ in itself. So, Christ against culture is to say that politics and culture, man is evil, right? The culture of man is evil. The culture of man is sinful, right? So for that reason, there is no interaction between light and darkness. You get that? There is no relationship between light and darkness. So that's the argument there. So when we look at the concept of Christ against culture, Christ is directly oppositional to what? To the concept of culture. So for that reason, if you are in Christ, you should have nothing to do with what? With culture. Does that make sense? Right? Have nothing to do with culture. The downside of this argument, for instance, is that the fact that we become apolitical, right? Because there's this popular song when growing up that will say, "This world is not my own. I'm just passing through." Do you know this song? Right? This world is not my own. I'm just passing through. So just come in, do your assignment as God has asked you to do, and move on. You have no relationship with the world, right? It's a seclusionary framework as it stands, right? So basically that's the concept here. But that concept in itself is from a realist premise, right? Because the notion is that man is evil. And you cannot change man. There's nothing you want to do about man. The evilness in man will remain. So for that reason, you rather stay there, right? And then the second argument here has a liberalist and idealist point of view, right? To say that, like you said, liberalism see the good in man, right? There's still, in as much as there's evil, there is still hope that we can change this man, right? So Christ in culture sees the fact that we can actually create a Christian culture from the society, right? So the implication of that is that we can be involved in politics, but we can have a Christian kind of politics, right? But the question is, if you look at that argument, also that's a liberal view. But when you look at that argument from a realist point of view, is it possible for us to create a Christian kind of politics? Right? Will a Christian kind of politics survive in the world that we are? That's a question for you. Anybody? Any taker? Can we create a Christian kind of politics? Yes.
I just want to add on to the question.
Yeah.
I think the first step is to understand what is Christian politics.
Okay. Yeah, maybe we should start with that, right? So, given the general background, the concept of Christian, right? Or better still, taking it from the space of the Bible. Remember that in the book of Acts, right? The disciples were first referred to as Christian, where? In Antioch. Right? They were first referred to as Christian in Antioch. And the argument of so that's why again, going back and coming in again, remember that Christ was not a Christian, right? Are we together? Jesus Christ was not a Christian. He was a Jew, right? And he practiced Judaism. You get that? So it was in Antioch because Jesus Christ left this world before the concept of Christianity was conceptualized, right? So in Antioch, the followers of Christ were referred to as what? As Christian. And the reason why they were referred to as Christian was what was the reason? What was the reason? Is because they acted like Christ. They were Christ-like. So they saw them and they said, these ones are acting like the Christ, right? And what is this act? Their act of identification, right? They acted like Christ, right? And for that reason, they were referred to as Christian. So that's the background of Christianity itself, right? So not everybody is a Christian, right? Even if you bear John and Peter, right? And Mary and Martha, right? Because for you to be referred to in the true sense of the word as a Christian, it implies that you must what? Act like Christ, right? Are we developing a concept here, right? We must act like Christ to be referred to as Christian, right? So if you don't act like Christ, then you are not Christian. So then what are the acts of Christ, like you said, right? Modesty, right? Righteousness, the concept of holiness, right? The concept of truth telling, regardless of the consequence, right? Speak